The Christmas tree glowed amber and gold in my parents' living room in Columbus, Ohio, the kind of warm, Norman Rockwell glow that makes everything look like a Hallmark movie. Cinnamon candles burned on the mantel. Bing Crosby drifted through the speakers. My mother, Barbara, wore her favorite red cardigan, the one she saves for family photos. My father, Richard, sat in his leather recliner like a king surveying his kingdom. My sister, Natalie, perched on the arm of the couch, scrolling through her phone, already bored before the night even started. Everything looked perfect. Everything felt wrong. If you're ready to see how justice finally catches up with those who abuse their power, go ahead and like this video. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now, because you don't want to miss tomorrow's story about authorities picking the wrong victim, and what happened when the truth came out. I stood near the doorway, holding a store-bought pumpkin pie because I'd learned years ago that homemade anything from me would be critiqued, dissected, and compared to Natalie's effortless perfection. She'd brought a charcuterie board from Trader Joe's that my mother called inspired. I brought pie. That's how it always worked. The gift exchange started after dinner, a tradition my family took as seriously as the Super Bowl. My mother orchestrated it like a director, arranging the presents under the tree with military precision. Red and green paper, bows the size of dinner plates, name tags written in her perfect cursive. She called names one by one, handing out boxes with a smile that never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me. "Natalie," she said first, handing my sister a large silver box. Natalie tore it open. Cashmere scarf. The expensive kind from Nordstrom. She squealed, wrapped it around her neck, and posed for a photo. My mother beamed. "Richard," she called next, handing my father a navy box. "New watch." He held it up to the light, admiring the way it caught the glow from the tree. "Beautiful, Barb," he murmured. "Natalie," my mother said again. Another box. Leather boots. The kind I'd mentioned wanting 3 months ago during a casual phone call my mother apparently filed away under things to give Natalie. I stayed still, hands folded in my lap, waiting. Natalie. A third box. A fourth. Jewelry. A cookbook she'd never open. A framed photo of her and our parents at last summer's lake trip in Lake Tahoe. I wasn't in the photo. I'd been there. I'd taken the photo. My chest tightened. The pile under the tree shrank. My mother's hand moved slower now, deliberately avoiding the corner where a single box sat untouched. My name wasn't on it. I already knew. "Richard," she said again, handing him socks. Expensive ones, but still socks. "Natalie." 5, 6, 7 gifts. Natalie's pile grew like a small mountain beside her on the couch. My father chuckled, sipping his bourbon. My mother smoothed her cardigan, satisfied. And then the tree was bare. No box for me. No name called. No "oh, we must have forgotten," or "it's in the other room." Just silence. The kind that fills a space so completely it becomes a presence of its own. I looked at my mother. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at my father. He adjusted his new watch. I looked at Natalie. She was already posting a photo of her scarf to Instagram, caption reading, "Blessed by the best fam." The room shimmered. Not from tears. I wouldn't give them that, but from something colder. Clarity. This wasn't an accident. This was a message. I stood up slowly, quietly, the way you stand when you've finally understood a language you've been hearing your whole life, but never let yourself translate. I reached for my coat on the hook by the door. My mother's voice cut through the silence, sharp and sudden. "Where are you going?" I didn't turn around. "Home. We haven't even had dessert yet." I gripped my keys so hard the metal bit into my palm. "I'm not hungry." "Don't be dramatic," my father muttered, not even looking up from his watch. I opened the door. Cold December air rushed in, biting and clean. Behind me, Natalie laughed at something on her phone. My mother sighed like I was the inconvenience, like my absence would ruin her perfect Christmas aesthetic. I stepped onto the porch, snow crunching under my boots, and pulled the door shut behind me. For the first time in my life, I didn't look back. My name is Charlotte Hayes, and for most of my 32 years, I believed that if I just worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, and needed little enough, My family would eventually see me. Not the way they saw Natalie, my younger sister. The one who glowed in every room like she'd swallowed the sun, but at least as someone who mattered. Someone worth remembering during a Christmas gift exchange. I grew up in a split-level house in the suburbs of Columbus, the kind of neighborhood where everyone mowed their lawns on Saturday mornings and waved at each other from driveways. My parents, Barbara and Richard Hayes, were the kind of people who looked perfect on paper. Dad worked in insurance. Mom taught second grade at the local elementary school. They attended church on Sundays, hosted barbecues on the 4th of July, and never missed a PTA meeting when Natalie was in school. When I was in school, they were busy. It started small. Little things I told myself didn't matter. When I made honor roll in 6th grade, my mother smiled and said, "That's wonderful, sweetie," then immediately turned to Natalie to ask about her dance recital. When I got into Ohio State on a partial scholarship, my father nodded and said, "Good, that'll help with costs." But when Natalie got into the same school 3 years later with no scholarship at all, they threw her a party and invited half the neighborhood. I learned early that my victories were expected. Natalie's were celebrated. By the time I graduated and moved to Cleveland for my first job as a social worker, I'd perfected the art of making myself smaller. I worked long hours at a nonprofit, helping kids in the foster system navigate the same kind of invisibility I'd lived with my entire childhood. I sent birthday cards. I called every Sunday. I drove the 2 hours back to Columbus for every holiday, every dinner, every last-minute emergency that always seemed to involve Natalie needing something. And I told myself it was fine. That's what family does. You show up. You help. You don't keep score. But the truth I didn't let myself see until that Christmas night, was that I'd been keeping score my whole life. I just didn't know what to do with the numbers. Natalie had always been the easy child. Bubbly, charming, the kind of person who could walk into a Starbucks and leave with 3 new friends and a free latte. She bounced from job to job, apartment to apartment, relationship to relationship, and every time she stumbled, our parents caught her. They co-signed her lease when she couldn't afford rent. They paid off her credit card debt when she overspent on a trip to Miami. They bought her a used Honda Civic when she totaled her last car texting at a red light. And me? I paid my own rent, my own bills, my own student loans. I asked for nothing because I learned that needing things made me a burden. The pattern had been there all along, woven so tightly into the fabric of our family that I didn't recognize it as cruelty. I thought it was just how things were. Natalie was the sun. I was the moon. She got the light. I got the reflection. But that night, standing on my parents' porch with snow dusting my coat and my breath fogging in the frozen air, something inside me shifted. Not anger. Not yet. Just a quiet, undeniable knowing. I had spent 32 years waiting for my name to be called, waiting to be seen, waiting for proof that I mattered to the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. And they had just given me the proof I needed. They didn't forget to buy me a gift. They chose not to. They looked at that empty space under the tree where my name should have been and decided it was fine, normal, unremarkable. I started my car, turned the heat on full blast, and sat there for a long moment, watching the warm glow of their living room through the front window. Inside, my mother was probably cutting the pie I'd brought. My father was probably pouring another bourbon. Natalie was probably already opening her 8th gift, laughing, glowing, completely unaware that anything had even happened. Because to them nothing had. I pulled out of the driveway slowly, carefully, the way you leave a place you know you're never coming back to. The streetlights blurred past. The highway stretched wide and empty ahead of me. And somewhere between Columbus and Cleveland, I made myself a promise. I was done waiting. This wasn't the moment I fell apart. This was the moment I finally woke up. And what happened next, what I built, who I became, the way their perfect little world unraveled without me holding it together. None of them saw it coming. Not even me. But it was coming. The moment I walked into my parents' house that Christmas Eve, I knew something was different. Not wrong exactly, just off like a song played in the wrong key. My mother greeted me at the door with a hug that lasted half a second too short. My father waved from his recliner, without standing. Natalie didn't even look up from her phone. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine, the artificial kind from those Glade plugins my mother swore by. The tree stood in the corner of the living room, 7 feet tall, decorated with the same ornaments we'd used since I was a kid. White lights, red bows, a porcelain angel on top that Natalie had picked out when she was 5. Dinner was ham, green bean casserole, and mashed potatoes. Standard Hayes family fare. We ate in near silence, punctuated only by my mother asking Natalie about her new apartment in Short North, and my father grunting approvingly at her answers. I mentioned a new program I'd launched at work, helping teenagers aging out of foster care find stable housing. My mother said, "That's nice, honey," and passed the rolls. After dessert, pecan pie that my mother made and pumpkin pie I'd brought from Kroger, we moved to the living room for the gift exchange. This was the main event, the part of Christmas my mother planned for weeks. She'd been doing it the same way since I was 10. Arrange all the gifts under the tree by size and color, call out names one by one, take photos of every open box. I sat on the couch near the window, hands folded in my lap. Natalie sprawled across the love seat like a cat in a sunbeam. My parents positioned themselves near the tree, my mother kneeling on the floor, my father standing with his bourbon in hand. "All right," my mother said, clapping her hands together. "Let's get started." She reached under the tree and pulled out a large silver box with Natalie's name on it. My sister tore into it with the enthusiasm of a kid half her age. Cashmere scarf. She held it up, modeling it for an imaginary camera. My mother took 3 photos. "Richard," my mother called next, handing my father a flat rectangular box. "New leather wallet." He opened it, nodded, slipped his old one out of his pocket, and transferred his cards immediately. "Natalie." Another box. Boots. The caramel-colored knee-high ones I'd mentioned wanting during our last phone call. Natalie pulled them on over her leggings, stood up, and spun. My mother applauded. I waited. "Natalie." A third box. Earrings. Small, delicate gold. She put them on immediately. My mother took more photos. "Richard." Socks. Expensive ones, the kind from that catalog he likes. He chuckled, said something about never having enough socks. "Natalie." 4, 5, 6. The pile beside my sister grew taller. A cookbook. A candle set. A framed photo of her and our parents at Cedar Point last summer. I wasn't in the photo. I'd been there. I'd taken the photo. My chest tightened, but I kept my face neutral. Maybe there was a separate pile. Maybe my gifts were in the other room. Maybe. Natalie. 7. The tree was nearly bare now. Just a few small boxes remained, tucked in the back. My mother reached for one, pulled it out, and my heart lifted for half a second. She handed it to my father. Tie clip. I looked at the tree. 1 box left. Small. Square. Gold paper. My mother stood up, brushed off her knees, and smiled. "Well, that's everything." The room went still. I stared at her. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at my father. He sipped his bourbon. I looked at Natalie. She was scrolling through the photos on her phone, already captioning them for Instagram. No one said anything. No one moved. No one acknowledged that my name had never been called. Not once. I stood up slowly. My legs felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. I reached for my coat. "Charlotte," my mother said, voice tight. "Where are you going?" I didn't answer. I just opened the door and stepped out into the snow. Behind me, the warmth of their perfect Christmas glowed. Ahead of me, the cold night waited. And for the first time in my life, the cold felt like freedom. I didn't slam the door. I didn't throw anything. I didn't turn around and deliver the speech I'd been rehearsing in my head for 32 years. I just left. My boots crunched through the snow on the front walkway. Behind me, I heard my mother's voice, muffled through the closed door. "She's being dramatic again." My father's low rumble. Natalie's laugh. I kept walking. My car sat at the curb, covered in a thin layer of fresh snow. I brushed off the windshield with my sleeve, got in and turned the key. The engine coughed once, twice, then roared to life. Heat blasted from the vents, cold at first, then gradually warming. I sat there for a long moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at the house I'd grown up in. The Christmas lights blinked red and green along the roofline. Through the front window, I could see the tree still glowing. My mother moved past the window, probably picking up wrapping paper. My father's silhouette settled back into his recliner. Natalie's shadow danced across the wall, probably modeling her new boots again. Inside that house, nothing had changed. They were already moving on, already forgetting the empty space where my name should have been. But something in me had shifted. Something fundamental and irreversible. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb. Slowly, carefully. I didn't peel out. I didn't speed. I just drove, following the familiar route back toward I-71, the highway that would take me north to Cleveland, back to my apartment, back to the life I'd built entirely on my own. My phone buzzed. Once, twice, 3 times. I glanced at the screen at a red light. Mom, you're embarrassing yourself. Natalie, seriously? It's Christmas. Dad, call your mother. I silenced the phone and dropped it into the cup holder. The highway was empty, just a long stretch of asphalt disappearing into darkness. Snow fell lightly, catching in my headlights like static. I drove in silence. No radio. No podcast. Just the hum of the engine and the rhythm of my own breathing. Somewhere around Mansfield I felt it. Not tears. I'd cried enough over the years, but something else. A loosening. Like a knot I'd been carrying in my chest for decades had finally started to unravel. I'd spent my entire life waiting for them to see me, hoping that if I just stayed quiet enough, worked hard enough, needed little enough, they'd finally look at me the way they looked at Natalie. With pride. With love. With the kind of unconditional acceptance you're supposed to get just for existing. But they never did. And tonight, they'd made it clear they never would. I pulled into my apartment complex just after midnight. The parking lot was quiet, most of my neighbors already asleep. I climbed the stairs to my second-floor unit, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. My apartment was small. A 1-bedroom in Cleveland Heights, nothing fancy. But it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every picture on the wall, every book on the shelf, I'd chosen it. I'd paid for it. I'd built it without asking anyone for help. I dropped my keys on the counter, took off my coat, and stood in the silence. For the first time in my life, that silence didn't feel lonely. It felt like power. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I didn't write an angry text or plan some dramatic confrontation. I just stood there, breathing, letting the weight of 32 years finally lift off my shoulders. They thought I'd come crawling back. They thought I'd apologize, beg for forgiveness, shrink myself down even smaller to fit back into their perfect family picture. They were wrong. I walked to my bedroom, changed into sweatpants, and sat on the edge of my bed. My phone buzzed again. I didn't look at it. Instead, I opened my laptop and stared at the blank screen. This wasn't the moment I fell apart. This was the moment I finally started building something they could never take away. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was crying. I'd run out of tears for them years ago. But because my mind wouldn't stop replaying every moment, every choice, every silent concession I'd made to keep the peace in a family that never offered me any. I sat cross-legged on my bed, laptop open, the blue glow washing over my face. Outside, Cleveland was asleep. Inside, I was wide awake in a way I hadn't been in years. I started scrolling through old photos on my phone. Not the recent ones. The ones from years ago, buried deep in folders I'd labeled family, with a heart emoji I now realized was aspirational, not accurate. There was one from my high school graduation. Me in my cap and gown, standing between my parents. I was smiling. They were looking at the camera, not at me. In the background, barely visible, was Natalie bored, scrolling through her phone even back then. Another photo. Thanksgiving 3 years ago. The whole family around the table. I was at the far end, partially cut off by the frame. Natalie was dead center, laughing at something my father had said. Another, my college graduation. I'd driven 4 hours back to Columbus so they could be there. In the photo, my mother's checking her watch. My father's talking to someone off camera. Natalie didn't even come. She had a date that day. I kept scrolling. Birthday after birthday where the cakes got smaller, the celebrations quieter, until eventually they stopped altogether. "You're an adult now," my mother had said when I turned 25. "We don't need to make a big deal out of it." Natalie's 25th birthday had been a surprise party with 50 guests. I closed the photos and opened my notes app. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then started typing. Not a letter I'd ever send, just thoughts, truths, things I needed to see written out in black and white so I could finally believe them. They didn't forget to buy me a gift. They chose not to. This wasn't an accident. This was a pattern. I have funded their emergencies, covered Natalie's mistakes, driven hours for dinners where I barely spoke, and stayed quiet every single time they made me feel small. And tonight, they didn't even pretend I mattered. I stared at those words, the cursor blinking at the end of the sentence. Then I kept typing. I've been waiting my whole life for them to see me. But they do see me. They see me as the backup plan. The safety net. The one who'll always show up, always help, always forgive. They see me exactly the way I've allowed them to. That line hit differently. I read it 3 times, feeling something cold and clarifying settle into my bones. I hadn't just been overlooked. I'd been complicit in my own invisibility. Every time I swallowed an insult, every time I made myself smaller so Natalie could shine brighter, every time I said it's fine when it wasn't, I taught them that I didn't require care. That I didn't deserve it. I stood up, pacing my small bedroom. The walls were covered with things I loved. Art prints from local Cleveland artists, a bookshelf stuffed with novels, a corkboard pinned with photos of my co-workers, my work kids, my friends from the yoga studio I'd joined last year. Not a single photo of my family. I stopped in front of my dresser mirror. The woman staring back at me looked tired. Sad. But not broken. Not anymore. I thought about the kids I worked with. The teenagers in foster care who'd been abandoned, overlooked, told they weren't worth the effort. I spent my days telling them they mattered, that their worth wasn't determined by the people who failed to see it. And yet I'd never believed that about myself. I walked back to the bed, sat down and opened a new note. At the top, I typed, "What I'm done with." Then I made a list. 1. Driving 2 hours for dinners where I'm an afterthought. 2. Sending birthday cards to people who forget mine. 3. Answering emergency calls that are never really emergencies. 4. Pretending it doesn't hurt when they choose Natalie over me, every single time. 5. Waiting for them to love me the way I've always loved them. I stared at that last line, my throat tight. Then I typed one more. What I'm done waiting for. And underneath it just one word. Them. I closed the laptop. The room fell into darkness except for the faint glow of streetlights through my window. Outside, snow was still falling, soft and silent. I lay back on my bed, staring at the ceiling. This wasn't rage. It wasn't even sadness anymore. It was something quieter. Something that felt like a door closing and a window opening at the same time. For 32 years, I'd built my life around their approval. I'd shaped myself into the daughter I thought they wanted. Reliable, uncomplicated, easy to ignore. But that version of me was exhausted. And tonight, in the silence of my apartment, I finally let her go. I didn't know yet what would come next. I didn't have a plan. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was done being invisible. And the moment I made that decision, everything started to shift. January arrived cold and unforgiving. The kind of Cleveland winter that makes you question why anyone lives this far north. But I didn't mind the cold anymore. It felt clarifying. Like it was burning away everything I didn't need. I started small. On New Year's Day, instead of driving to Columbus for my mother's traditional brunch, the one where Natalie always arrived late and hungover and was still treated like royalty, I went to a community center in Tremont and signed up to volunteer. They needed someone to help run a weekly art workshop for kids aging out of foster care. I raised my hand. The first session was awkward. The kids were guarded, skeptical of another adult promising to show up. But I kept showing up. Every Saturday morning at 9. I brought supplies, sketchbooks, charcoal, watercolors. We didn't talk much at first. We just created. By February, one of the girls, Keisha, started staying after class to show me her drawings. By March, 3 more kids were doing the same. They weren't waiting for me to save them. They just needed someone to see them. I knew the feeling. In the evenings, I started saying yes to things I'd always said no to. My coworker, Jenna, invited me to a book club that met at a cafe in Ohio City. I went. We read Toni Morrison and drank too much wine, and argued about symbolism until midnight. Jenna introduced me to her friend Marcus, who ran a community garden in Detroit Shoreway. He needed help building raised beds. I spent a Saturday digging in the dirt, hands blistered, laughing at jokes I actually understood because no one was talking over me. I joined a pottery class at the Cleveland Institute of Art. My first bowl looked like a drunk amoeba. My instructor, an older woman named Diane, said, "Perfect. Now make another one." So I did. And another. And another. By April, my apartment had 7 misshapen bowls lining the kitchen counter, each one slightly better than the last. I stopped checking my phone obsessively. The first week was hard. Muscle memory kept pulling me toward the screen, waiting for texts that never came. My mother called twice in January. I let it go to voicemail. Natalie sent a few messages. "Mom's worried about you. You are being childish. Just call her back." I didn't respond. Not out of spite, but out of preservation. Every time I felt the pull to explain myself, to soften my boundaries, to make myself smaller again, I looked at the photos on my wall. The ones I'd started pinning up in February. Keisha holding up her first finished painting. Marcus and me covered in soil, grinning like idiots. The book club ladies squeezed onto Jenna's couch, faces flushed from laughter and red wine. My pottery instructor giving me a thumbs up beside my least ugly bowl. Not a single photo of my family. And for the first time in my life, that didn't feel like something missing. It felt like something found. By May, I'd started running. Not for weight loss or self-punishment, but because I liked the way my body felt when it moved with purpose. I ran along the Lake Erie shore in Edgewater Park, watching the sunrise turn the water pink and gold. Some mornings, strangers ran beside me. We'd nod, share the quiet understanding of people who choose to show up for themselves before the world wakes up. I adopted a dog in June. A scruffy terrier mix from the county shelter, all wiry fur and nervous energy. I named him Buddy. He slept at the foot of my bed and followed me from room to room like I was the most important person in the world. Because to him I was. One Sunday morning in July, I hosted brunch at my apartment. Just 5 people. Jenna, Marcus, Diane, Keisha, and another girl from the art workshop named Tasha. We ate scrambled eggs and burned toast and laughed so hard that Buddy started barking. Diane raised her coffee mug. "To Charlotte," she said. "The woman who taught us all that showing up is the best gift you can give." They clinked mugs. I smiled, throat tight with something that felt like belonging. Later, after everyone left, I stood at my kitchen window, looking out at the city. My phone sat on the counter, silent. No missed calls. No guilt trips. No emergencies that required me to drop everything and drive 2 hours south. Just peace. The kind I'd built myself, one misshapen bowl, one sunrise run, one Saturday morning at a time. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was living. I didn't hear about it directly. That's the thing about boundaries, they work both ways. When you stop being the person everyone calls in a crisis, you stop hearing about the crises altogether. The first crack in their perfect world came through Jenna. We were at her place in late August, sitting on her balcony with iced coffees, when she tilted her head and asked, "Hey, isn't your sister Natalie Hayes? The one who does social media marketing?" I tensed. "Yeah. Why?" Jenna pulled out her phone and turned it toward me. It was a screenshot from a Columbus subreddit, posted 3 days earlier. "Anyone else getting ghosted by Natalie Hayes? Hired her for my small business's social media in June. Paid $2,000 upfront." She posted twice, stopped responding to emails, and now her number's disconnected. Is this normal? The comments were brutal. 12 other people chiming in with similar stories. One person had filed a complaint with the Better Business Bureau. Another mentioned contacting a lawyer. I stared at the screen, something cold settling in my stomach. Not schadenfreude, not quite. just recognition. Natalie had always been careless with other people's expectations. The difference was our parents had always been there to clean up the mess, smooth things over, write checks to make problems disappear. But I wasn't there anymore. And apparently, neither was their safety net. 2 weeks later, Marcus mentioned something at the community garden. He was from Columbus originally, still had friends there. Crazy thing, he said, pulling weeds beside me. My buddy's wife teaches at your mom's old school. Said Barbara Hayes took early retirement last month. Health reasons, supposedly, but people are saying it was stress-related. Something about family stuff. I kept my hands in the soil, didn't look up. Huh. He didn't push. That was the thing about my new people. They let silence be silence. September brought more whispers, little pieces of information that drifted back to me through people who didn't know they were delivering intelligence. My mother's best friend, Carol, ran into Diane at a craft fair and mentioned that Barbara hadn't been to book club in months. She seems tired, Carol had said. Like she's carrying something heavy. In October, my father's name appeared in my inbox. Subject line: we need to talk. I stared at it for a full minute before deleting it without opening. 3 days later, Natalie called. I let it ring. She called again. And again. On the 4th attempt, she left a voicemail. Her voice was different. Smaller. The bravado stripped away. Charlotte, it's me. Look, I know you're mad or whatever, but I really need to talk to you. Things are really bad right now. My business fell apart. I had to move back in with Mom and Dad. Scott broke up with me. He said I was. Her voice cracked. He said I was too dependent. That I never learned to handle things on my own. A long pause. I could hear her breathing, shaky and uneven. Mom's not doing well. She's been having these panic attacks. Dad won't talk about it, but I think they're having money problems. Real ones. And I don't know how to fix any of this. You always knew how to fix things. Another pause. Please call me back. Please. I know I messed up. I know we all did. But we're family. That has to mean something, right? The voicemail ended. I sat in my living room. Buddy curled beside me, staring at my phone. We're family. That has to mean something. For 32 years, I'd believed that. I'd believed it so deeply that I let them treat me like the foundation of a house they never thanked for holding them up. And the moment I stepped away, the whole structure started to crack. My mother's early retirement wasn't about health. It was about the exhaustion of maintaining a perfect image when the scaffolding had collapsed. My father's silence wasn't strength. It was the desperate quiet of a man who didn't know how to ask for help because he'd never had to. And Natalie had built an entire life on the assumption that someone would always catch her when she fell. She'd never learned to stand on her own, because she'd never had to. I wasn't their foundation. I was their crutch. And the moment I removed myself, they'd all stumbled. I felt something twist in my chest. Not satisfaction. Not quite guilt either. Just a deep, clarifying sadness for the people they could have been if they'd ever learned to carry their own weight. I deleted the voicemail. That night, I went to my art workshop. Keisha showed me a charcoal portrait she'd been working on for weeks. A self-portrait, fierce and unflinching. This is who I am, she said, eyes bright with pride. Not who people think I should be. I hugged her. It's perfect. On the drive home, I passed the exit for I-71 South. The one that led back to Columbus. Back to my parents' house. Back to the version of myself who believed that love meant disappearing. I didn't take it. I kept driving north, toward the life I'd built without them. Toward the people who saw me not because I made myself useful, but because I made myself visible. Their world was falling apart. Mine was just beginning. They showed up on a Saturday morning in mid-November, unannounced and uninvited. I was in my kitchen making coffee, still in my pajamas, when I heard the knock. Not the friendly tap-tap of a neighbor. This was urgent, insistent, the kind of knock that demands to be answered. Buddy barked. I moved to the door and looked through the peephole. My mother. My father. Natalie. All three of them, standing in the hallway of my Cleveland Heights apartment building like they'd traveled through a portal from a life I no longer lived. My chest tightened. For a moment, I considered not opening the door, just standing there, silent, until they gave up and left. But something, curiosity, maybe, or the last thread of obligation I hadn't yet cut, made me turn the lock. I opened the door halfway. Didn't step aside. Didn't smile. Charlotte, my mother said, her voice cracking on my name. She looked older, thinner. Her hair, usually perfectly styled, hung limp around her face. My father stood behind her, hands shoved in his coat pockets, eyes refusing to meet mine. Natalie hovered at the back, arms crossed, face pale and puffy like she'd been crying. "What are you doing here?" I asked, voice flat. "We needed to see you," my mother said, stepping forward like she was going to hug me. I didn't move. She stopped, hands dropping to her sides. "Sweetheart, we've been so worried. You won't return our calls. You won't answer texts. We didn't know what else to do. So you drove 2 hours without asking if I wanted to see you." My father cleared his throat. "Charlotte, don't be difficult. We just want to talk." "Difficult?" I repeated softly. The word hung in the air like smoke. Natalie shifted, her voice small. "Can we at least come in? It's freezing out here." I looked at the three of them. These people who had raised me, dismissed me, erased me from their perfect family portrait, and felt absolutely nothing. No anger. No guilt. Just a calm, unshakable certainty. "No," I said. My mother's face crumpled. "Charlotte, please. We made mistakes. We know that now. But we're family. We need to work through this." "Work through what, exactly?" I asked. "The part where you forgot to buy me a Christmas gift? Or the part where you've spent my entire life treating me like I don't matter?" "That's not fair," my father said, voice rising. "We've always supported you." I almost laughed. "You supported me? Dad, name one thing I've ever asked you for that you actually gave me." Silence. "That's what I thought." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We didn't mean to hurt you. We were trying to help Natalie. She needed us more." "And I didn't?" "You were always so strong," she whispered. "So independent. We thought you didn't need us." I shook my head slowly. "No. You thought it was easier to ignore me. There's a difference." Natalie stepped forward, desperation cracking her voice. "Charlotte, please. I lost everything. My business, my apartment, Scott. I'm living with Mom and Dad again and I don't know what to do. You need me to fix it," I finished. "The way I always have." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "No," I said simply. "What?" Natalie's voice broke. "I'm not your safety net anymore. I'm not anyone's safety net. You want to fix your life? Do it yourself." My mother grabbed my hand. "Charlotte, we're begging you. We can't do this without you." I looked down at her hand on mine, the same hand that had handed gifts to Natalie, one after another, while I sat watching. The same hand that had waved me off when I needed comfort, told me I was strong enough to handle it alone. I pulled my hand back. "You're going to have to," I said quietly. "Because I'm done." I stepped back and closed the door, locked it, leaned against it, listening to the muffled voices on the other side. My mother's sobs, my father's angry muttering, Natalie's pleading. And then footsteps. Fading down the hallway. Gone. Buddy nuzzled my leg. I reached down, scratched behind his ears and breathed. For the first time in my life, I'd chosen myself. And it felt like freedom. They didn't leave after I closed the door. I heard them in the hallway for another 5 minutes. Whispered arguments, my mother's quiet crying, Natalie's frustrated sighs. Then silence. I thought they'd gone. But 20 minutes later, there was another knock. Softer this time. Just one person. I opened the door. My mother stood alone, mascara smudged, hands clutched together like she was praying. "Please," she said. "Just 5 minutes. Let me say what I came to say." Something in her face. The exhaustion, the brokenness, made me step aside. Not out of forgiveness. Out of finality. Because I needed her to hear this just as much as she needed to say whatever she'd come to say. She walked into my living room slowly, taking in the space like she'd never seen it before. The misshapen pottery bowls on my kitchen counter. The photos pinned to my corkboard. Keisha, Marcus, Jenna, Diane, all the people who'd become my real family. Buddy watched her from the couch, tail wagging cautiously. "You've built a nice life here," my mother said quietly. "I did," I replied. "Without any of you." She flinched. "Charlotte, I know you're angry." "I'm not angry anymore, Mom. I'm clear." She turned to face me, eyes red and desperate. "Then help me understand. We made one mistake. One Christmas. And you've cut us out completely. That's not fair." I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. "One mistake," I repeated. "Mom, do you want me to walk you through it? Because I can." "I've had 10 months to think about this." She didn't answer. Just stood there, trembling. "When I was 12, I made honor roll. You said that's nice. And then spent 20 minutes talking about Natalie's dance recital. When I got into Ohio State, you nodded. When Natalie got in 3 years later, you threw her a party and invited the whole neighborhood." My mother opened her mouth. I kept going. "When I graduated college, you checked your watch during the ceremony. When I got my first job, you asked if the pay was good enough to help with bills. When I started my nonprofit work, you said it was sweet, and changed the subject to Natalie's new apartment." "Charlotte, I'm not done." My voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. It was steady, surgical, precise. I drove to Columbus every holiday for 10 years. I answered every emergency call. I helped pay for Natalie's car insurance, her credit card debt, her rent when she couldn't cover it. I showed up. Every single time. And you know what you gave me in return? Silence. "Nothing," I said. "Not a birthday card. Not a phone call on a random Tuesday just to ask how I was. Nothing. And then, last Christmas, you didn't even pretend anymore. You stood in that living room and handed gift after gift to Natalie, while I sat there invisible. And when I finally left, you called me dramatic." My mother's face crumpled. "We didn't mean." "Yes, you did." I stepped closer. "You meant every bit of it. You taught me that my worth was tied to what I could give you. That love was something I had to earn, but Natalie got it for free. You taught me that being strong meant being invisible. And I believed you. For 32 years, I believed you." Tears streamed down her face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We need you, Charlotte. We can't do this without you." And there it was. The truth underneath all the apologies. We need you. Not we love you. Not we were wrong. Not you deserved better. Just we need you. I shook my head slowly. "No, Mom. You need someone to fix the mess you made. You need someone to prop Natalie up when she falls. You need someone to be the foundation while you build your perfect family on top of me. But I'm not that person anymore." "Please," she whispered. "We're falling apart." "I know," I said quietly. "And that's not my problem." She stared at me like I'd slapped her. "How can you say that? We're your family." "Family doesn't erase you," I said. "Family doesn't make you small so someone else can shine. Family doesn't forget your name on Christmas." I walked to the door and opened it. "I hope you figure it out," I said. "I really do. But you're going to have to do it without me. Because I finally learned something you never taught me." "What's that?" she asked, voice breaking. "That I matter. Even when you couldn't see it." She walked past me into the hallway, shoulders shaking. She turned back one last time, eyes pleading. "Charlotte. Goodbye, Mom." I closed the door. This time, I didn't hear her footsteps. I didn't hear anything. Just the quiet hum of my apartment. The jingle of Buddy's collar as he trotted over. The steady rhythm of my own breathing. And for the first time in my entire life, that quiet didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like peace. Thanksgiving came 6 weeks later. Not in Columbus. Not at my parents' house with the same beige walls and the same silent hierarchies. This Thanksgiving happened in my apartment in Cleveland Heights, surrounded by people who chose me not because they had to, but because they wanted to. I'd sent the invitations 2 weeks earlier. Nothing fancy, just a text to the group chat I'd started back in spring. Friendsgiving at my place. Bring a dish. Bring yourself. 2 p.m. Thursday. Jenna arrived first, carrying a green bean casserole and a bottle of wine. "I cannot believe you're hosting," she said, grinning as she set everything on my counter. "Last year you spent the holiday alone eating takeout." "Last year I didn't know any better," I said. Marcus came next with sweet potato pie and his girlfriend, Andrea, who I'd met twice and already loved. Diane brought rolls and a story about her ex-husband that had us laughing before we even sat down. Keisha and Tasha arrived together, shy at first, clutching a store-bought pumpkin pie like it was fragile. "You didn't have to bring anything," I told them. "We wanted to," Keisha said quietly. "You always show up for us." My throat tightened. "You show up for me too." By the time everyone settled around my table, the one I'd bought secondhand and refinished myself, the apartment felt full in a way it never had before. Not crowded. Full. Like the space had been waiting for exactly these people. We ate turkey I'd somehow not burned, mashed potatoes Jenna had saved when I oversalted them, and pie that tasted better because we were eating it together. We told stories. Marcus talked about growing up in Akron. Diane shared memories of her late wife. Tasha opened up about her first foster family, the one that actually tried. And when Jenna raised her glass and said, "To Charlotte, for reminding us that family is who you choose," everyone clinked their glasses and looked at me with something I'd spent my whole life searching for. Acceptance. Not earned. Just given. After dinner, while everyone was sprawled across my couch and floor, too full to move, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. "Mom, happy Thanksgiving. We miss you." I stared at the text for a long moment. Part of me, the old part, the one that still remembered being 12 and hopeful, wanted to respond. Wanted to bridge the gap. Wanted to believe that missing me meant something had changed. But I knew better now. Missing me wasn't the same as seeing me. And I was done accepting crumbs from people who had the whole feast. I deleted the message and set my phone face down on the counter. "You okay?" Jenna asked from the couch. I looked around my apartment. At the people laughing in my living room. At the dog curled up at Marcus's feet. At the life I'd built from nothing but intention and boundaries and the quiet, stubborn belief that I deserved better. "Yeah," I said, smiling. "I really am." Later that night, after everyone left and I was washing dishes in the quiet glow of my kitchen, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked different. Not just older or wiser, but lighter. Like I'd been carrying a weight for so long I'd forgotten what my own posture looked like without it. I dried my hands and walked to my bedroom. On my nightstand sat a small wrapped box, a gift I'd bought for myself weeks earlier. I opened it slowly, carefully, savoring the moment. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a single charm, a tiny house. Not the house I grew up in. The home I'd built. I put it on, feeling the cool metal settle against my skin, and looked at myself in the mirror. For 32 years, I waited for my family to see me, to call my name, to make space for me at their table. And then I stopped waiting. I built my own table. I called my own name. I made my own space. And the people who loved me, they didn't need an invitation. They just showed up. I climbed into bed, Buddy curling up beside me, and pulled the blanket close. Outside, Cleveland was quiet, snow just starting to fall. Inside I was home. Not because of where I was, but because of who I'd become. And that was the best gift I'd ever given myself.